you're sticking into just ILS and PPC, you're just really limiting yourself to the exposure that you could have to others. If we're spending all of that budget just in paid search, paid, ILS, you're paying just to be there. You're not paying for the leases that they're bringing in. So that's kind of a challenge.
You're saying that a platform like TikTok is critical in trying to express the vibe of the property, which this generation puts an enormous priority on. Hey, this is Reid Wyckoff, CEO and co-founder at Digible. Welcome to another session of Riffing with Reid. I'm here with RayAnn Corton, formerly Ortiz, to sit down and talk about why single-channel marketing is killing the multifamily industry. I don't think it was quite that broad, but super excited to get into this topic, and hopefully it resonates with a lot of our listeners. And the common channels that end up being one or maybe two is ILS and search. Not to steal her thunder, but that will probably set us on our course. But before we go any further, I want to give a chance for RayAnn to just share a little bit of her background and why she's so passionate about this topic, and what you've been up to at Digible since you joined us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a while since I've been on the podcast, a few years. But yeah, as Reid mentioned, my name's RayAnn. I've been with Digible for over 6 years now. So it's been a while. Started out in the client services account management team and have slowly transitioned over into more of our growth team. And I've had a ton of fun doing that. Before Digible, I started, I was at another agency doing like affiliate and influencer marketing. So it was quite it was a shift coming into Digible when I came in. And then before that was more restaurant marketing. Which I kind of closely relate to multifamily marketing because it's a lot of like butts and seats is what we used to say. So instead of heads and beds, and has a lot of relation to like needing people to go to a physical location in order to get sales for the most part. So yeah, that's me. That's my background.
Cool. And it's also a bit franchised, you could say, which is similar to multifamily, kind of the parent-child, right?
Yeah.
Scenario, which she didn't say, but I'll go ahead and classify her as such, and hopefully you take it as flattery. But I'd say RayAnn is one of our strategy wizards at Digible, which is not a small, compliment or label, because we got a lot of great strategists. But what I've loved seeing from RayAnn over the years is just how much she's advanced in the way that she thinks, not just about digital marketing strategy, but I think you're one of the best in the building at kind of rounding things out. It's like there's a lot of other variables that we have to be thinking about when we're building strategy. And so it's just an awesome gift that you've built up and are now delivering to our clients, and obviously internally as well as we're growing the business. I also love the new look. I don't know how long this is going to stick because I feel like you and I bonded once. I don't remember if it was me, you, and Isabel, or just me and you about ABBA. But not kidding. For some reason, I don't know what song it was, but I'm getting weird looks from my girls in the car. They're like, "What are you playing?" I'm like,
"How do you not know?"
Only the most mega Swedish band of all time. But they have the bangs and you're giving me that, and it's a great look. So I hope you stick with it.
We'll see.
All right. Yeah. I took a pretty far leap there. All right. So let's get into it. I did say that I think, what we most associate single channel marketing, or I'll stretch and say dual, is ILS and search. That's kind of where it's been, and where a lot of these marketers still I'll say kind of fall back or default to when it comes to developing their media mix. There's a lot of reasons for that, which I'm going to let you start with, and I'll add if I choose to on why you think that is. But then we can talk a little more about what I think you're going to say are some of the consequences or risks of getting too simple, I'll just leave it at simple with how they approach these things. And then, I think there'll be some fun threads to tug on. So tell us what you mean when, if I didn't already, but when we're thinking single channel marketing and how it's kind of negatively impacting the industry, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you mentioned, it's definitely going to be ILS PPC heavy. I think that as a whole, multifamily has been stuck in this has worked for a really long time. We're going to stick with it. and that's what we're going to do. And so those have been the two like basic drivers of lead generation. And I know you did like a recent podcast too with Mitch, talked a lot about this as well. But those lead drivers are great, but they are nothing without the support of like their upper funnel components. And so when you're sticking into just ILS and PPC, you're just really limiting yourself to the exposure that you could have to other prospects within the market. And you're also limiting the ability for your prospects to be able to see everything that your property has to offer. You're really just dwindling yourself down to a couple keywords and hoping that sticks and hoping that you can compete with that. So, I kind of went on a tangent there, but I think those are the two that
you didn't go on a tangent. You didn't go on a tangent at all. You actually hit it on the head, meaning you're getting us started. And you went to the combo though of like, what are some of the consequences, and then a little bit of the why. Mm-hmm. So if you're good with it, let's unpack both of those independently, but a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
So you said one of the reasons that, and I don't think it's a theory, but we'll say it's a theory, that you believe this is still something that is kind of plaguing the industry. And we're speaking broadly, of course. There's plenty of marketers, in particular our clients, because they're amazing, that have advanced past this dark age. But there's some that still are there, and they have their reasons beyond it's what's worked in the past or it's what's familiar. Is there more to it? Like, are there other reasons that you believe this is still an issue as to why people are just putting their dollars in ILS and paid search?
Yeah, totally. I think for some people it's worked. If we increase our budget, it does enough, right? It has that threshold of it's doing enough, so we're fine. I think the other piece of that too is the visibility of what's actually working. You kind of get a fear of, okay, well, if we add these things in, how do we know what's working and what's not? Because some of these upper funnel levers are, they're not as visible. They're not as visible. And when I say that, I don't mean visible out there in the world, because they're way more visible out there, but they're not as visible in their attribution and their reporting and their conversion tracking. And so they kind of get scared, and having to answer that question to owners and let them know that their money is being spent wisely is a difficult conversation, especially when, a lot of the systems that we have today are not or operators have today are not set up for like multi-touch attribution. So it's a scary conversation. And so today, marketers can go into their dashboards. They can see the number of leads from their ILS source, the number of leads from their PPC source. It's very, very direct. And since those are really going to be your main conversion drivers, it's an easy story to tell. But what they're missing is that investing in that means that you're going to spend a whole lot more money to get to the same place. So yeah, I think that's kind of the main fear.
Let's keep going. So those are two big ones that were certainly on my list, and we'll come back to. I can see you're tempted. You're drawn into sharing some of the consequences of approaching it this way, but we'll get to that. But the tracking attribution, I think, is perhaps the biggest driver. It's either 1A or 1B, and you said either the A or the B, which is these channels aren't going to generate, they're not bottom of funnel. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to add the third, which is constrained budgets. So if these buildings, our clients, were dealing with $100,000 a month budgets, we'd probably see a lot more TikTok.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we'll get to that one and how and when you think that they can open things up a bit, because I wouldn't disagree if you gave me, I'm going to be extreme, a budget of $500 that I would not, for a lease up, put that in, or maybe even stabilize. It almost doesn't matter in this point, but in TikTok, I probably put it in ILS or search. So there's a point, unless you disagree, that I think you should be thinking, now I should explore tertiary, if you will, or secondary platforms that are not just bottom of the funnel lead gen. But on the attribution front, it's a real problem that I'm not sure is necessarily multifamilies to solve. It's more like, how do we account for it? But you're not necessarily going to solve it, which is TikTok, both in maturity and years, but also sophistication, I'm just going to latch on to TikTok, doesn't have the same targeting abilities that you see with paid search, which is way more advanced. Hopefully everybody knows this than the ILS options as far as what you can do there. The difference, of course, just if we need to, ILS, it's like these are your directories, whether it's Zillow, whether it's apartments.com, it's all like that. You can an apartment list that you can just go in and it's like a bullseye. It's like, and it doesn't mean it's a great experience, but it's like these are all apartments. I'm not distracted by anything else, and that's why I think they still bring a lot of value. The paid search, though, is where you can get super prescriptive, and this will be interesting to hear your thoughts on. Okay, on different budgets, like again, when do I get more focused on my long tail versus like short tail strategy, within search? And for those that need to know, it's like the short tail are going to be the very general, most competitive, like apartments near me, versus something that's more long tail, which is going to be with a lot more modifiers, something that's way more granular in the search and is more exact. And so there's trade-offs in doing that as well. However, with TikTok, knowing that you're not going to get the same level of granularity, and you don't have the same ability to do really sophisticated targeting the way you do with paid search, why and how would you say you should still do that? So let me give you. We're not going to full role play, but I got $5,000.
Yeah.
Each month to spend. And that's not 500. So I assume that would meet your kind of threshold of like, yeah, you should not just be putting that all into ILS and search or just one of those. How would you approach then and communicate the value and the reasoning behind incorporating a TikTok into that 5,000 or a Spotify? It's like, we'll cover off. We can start there if you want. ILS, search. You should do that. Here's what I think. And here's why I wouldn't only do that. And I would make room for, you already said it's like you got to have the upper funnel, you got to be driving some awareness, but just expand on that and then get a little bit more specific in how you would kind of arrive at what a reasonable budget is with the TikTok, and then what you would be doing to kind of overcome the gaps in attribution, where it's like there is going to be limits to how much we can report on and actually see.
Yeah.
So take it away.
Absolutely.
Take it away.
There's a ton that goes into that, right? Like there's like layers to this. Number one, if we have $5,000 today, we already see a ton of clients that will come in and say, I'm spending $5,000 in paid search. And it's not working for them. And so when you diversify, what that's going to do is help reduce your overall cost per acquisition. So today they're saying, I'm in ILS, I'm in paid search, this is what I've got. And sometimes their cost per acquisition is $500. I've talked to clients recently where their cost per acquisition is $1,200, and that's the only places that they're investing in. And so
set context for those listening. Like, what would you say is a reasonable cost per acquisition for a Class A in a mid market? So I'm just trying to think of a good mid market here. Austin.
Like Denver, Austin.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So like our ranges for cost per acquisition that we want to be around, which we have a ton of benchmarking around, is somewhere between like $46 and like $60. Anything higher than that, like that's kind of a concern.
So 500, 1,200 for you is like egregious.
That's wild.
It's like crazy.
That's insane. Yeah. And so that's kind of the first piece of like, if we're spending all of that budget just in paid search, paid, ILS number one, a lot of the times the big winners are going to be like the Zillows, the apartments.com. And you're paying just to be there. You're not paying for the leases that they're bringing in. So that's kind of a challenge.
Except for apartment lists. They are a cost per lease model. Yeah.
Which I love them for that. I think that that's some great honesty within like the space to have that. And then in paid search, if you're investing all of those dollars, kind of like I mentioned before, you're investing thousands of dollars for prospects to see you and encapsulate your entire property within a couple keywords. And a lot of the times, if you're not investing in things like, so TikTok, for example, Gen Zers today are not, which they are the renters. It's like 1999 or 2000 through 2015 or whatever that their age range is or something like that. they're no longer like a linear purchase journey. They're not just, okay, here are the 5 apartments that have 2 bedrooms. I'm going to go tour all of them and see which ones I like. They're very, very much looking on TikTok for what does the inside of the unit look like? Is the staff responding to comments? They look at that a ton to see if like that's the lifestyle that they want to be in. And lifestyle is about so much more than just do I have nice finishes? Am I in the right location? It's about who they are engaging with on a day-to-day basis because they are renting longer. So they're looking at reviews more often than most people. They want to see reviews from people who actually live there or who have actually toured there. And so like things like Reddit even are getting super popular with like how you can review apartments and things like that. So investing in like video forms like TikTok allows for renters in the locations that they are, because they are on TikTok, they are there. Everybody's there. It allows for them to see like what's going on inside their apartment, and what's everything that's available to them. I mean, attention span these days are terrible. And so, you want to get that like, hey, here's what it's like to live at this property. Not just from here's our 2 bedrooms, take it or leave it. But here's everything that we offer from an amenity space, from the interior living, from open concept, if you like that. We have these balconies that you can put plants out here if you want to, things like that. So these upper funnel channels are not, they're built in order to feed that paid search information. So that way you're not just competing with everybody else that's doing these short form keywords of apartments near me or apartments in Denver. They're seeing everything that you have to offer before they even get to that search journey. And that way they can recognize you in that moment and say, I've seen this. I know what they have to offer. I'm going to go here first, versus I might end up there at some point, but you're still going to be competing with everybody else.
I think that's great. I hope that registered, and I'm going to encapsulate that in 2 words. You're saying that a platform like TikTok is critical in trying to express, I'm going to use the V word here, been trending for a few years now, the vibe of the property,
Yeah.
which this generation puts an enormous priority on. Good luck expressing the vibe of a property in a paid search ad or on an ILS versus
Absolutely.
the abilities that you can do that on a TikTok ad. And then you also said you didn't, I don't think you used the word authenticity, but the kind of the honesty and the trust, which may seem funny for some, hearing that, like, would I trust TikTok, an ad there or a property marketing there more than I would? But I think, the reality is, yeah, probably actually there is going to be more trust there, because they're going to feel like, especially when it's user-generated content, which a lot of TikTok is, that it's a more honest picture of what it's like to live there. So now you got me hooked, and I don't think this will be the first time, both between us, but you talking to some of our clients. Okay, this makes sense. Let's get back to that budget. $5,000. How much should I spend on TikTok? So you've convinced me that it's not a good idea for me to only spend money on these ILSs or paid search because of the importance of expressing what it's like, the vibe to live at these properties, and it's such a cool property. How much should I put in there? And then how am I going to know whether that was a good decision or not? So talk to me about the reporting. Like, what would you be telling them to pay attention to? We've heard this for years and years on paid social and organic, but how many likes did you get? How many comments? And I'm not saying that's BS. I think there's still something to, in, air quotes, engagement metrics.
Yeah.
Would you say that you should kind of shift and lift, or lift and shift, some of the similar thinking from, platforms like Facebook, now Meta, of course, to TikTok, or is there a different way to evaluate a TikTok campaign? So start with a budget. You got me hooked. I want to spend some money on TikTok now, RayAnn. I told you it was $5,000. What do you think I should spend? And then follow up with, and here's how you should be tracking that.
Yeah, absolutely. So typical recommendation for a TikTok campaign is going to be anywhere between like $850 to like $1,200. And that's, that's not small. I want to recognize that in the multifamily industry, like that's not a small chunk of your budget, but it is valuable to be able to get there, get in front of those users, especially Gen Z. And Gen Alpha is coming up right behind them, and that's where they're at. And
I can't wait to hear what's behind Gen Alpha. I don't know if anybody's thrown that out yet.
I don't know yet.
I might be behind on my Gen labels, but anyways, go ahead.
And so as far as measurement and what you're looking at, I think that we are past the days of engagement. I think that there are some industries where engagement like that works very, very well, right? A lot of e-commerce, that's great. I think in this sense, what you want to be looking at is how many new people are you getting in front of? So that way you know that you're feeding that Google machine, or you feeding that search machine. And so what that looks like is actually diving into more of your Google Analytics, diving into Google Search Console. So diving into a couple of these other Google platforms that they have available to be able to...
Took me a second for anybody that's watching, not listening, to find my cheer button, but had to give RayAnn that for... go into the Google Analytics.
Yeah, because likes, engagements, clicks, that's amazing. That's great. That gives us a starting point, but that doesn't tell us how that's actually behaving on our website and how that's actually landing into your true ecosystem of converting a lead. So you want to look at like returning users. You want to look at your assisted channels. So your referral traffic, your organic traffic, direct traffic. Typically when we have our clients that are branching out from just ILS and PPC for the first time, that's the first place I like walk them through and navigate is, hey, over the coming next 90 days, what we want to see is this direct traffic, organic traffic increasing. And that's Google Analytics. And Google Search Console, you want to see, are you getting that lift in branded search terms? So search terms, Google Search Console, if anybody doesn't use it today, you should totally be using it. It's a great indicator for you to see how often your brand is being searched, how often you're showing up for searches. So it's kind of like a miniature SEO tool, like a minor SEO tool that you can use for yourself. But Google Search Console will give you increases in your brand traffic or brand queries that are coming in from Google. And that's usually a strong indicator that your upper funnel channels are driving people towards your website because they're seeing you out in the wild. And typically people who only invest in ILS and PPC, they're not getting that same traffic. And so when you make that shift, you see that grow. That's a good indicator as well.
Fantastic call outs there. Just to play it back, and most important ones is pay attention not to, and you didn't say ignore, but deprioritize engagement metrics and focus more on Google Analytics. And as an example, return visitors, direct traffic, organic traffic, wanting to push that. And you were very specific, which I love, 90 days. So don't look for that next week. And also don't be trying to figure this out 6 months from now. So I think it's good, really important to give some type of time frame as to how to evaluate or how long. And then you mentioned Search Console, which is also fantastic on the branded side. And that is, I think, fundamentally the biggest gap that I've come across. And I'm not just saying this, but less, and it's probably not a coincidence with our clients as we've had more of these conversations with them. But generally, I think there's still a pretty meaningful gap of how to evaluate almost indirect influence or outcomes of campaigns like TikTok. So it's like when we say indirect, I just mean don't look for impressions, number of clicks, click-through rate, conversions from TikTok. Look other places. That's actually what we're really aiming at. And one of the best places to look is those branded searches because, as you said, that means that we're starting to get the kind of the retention, the recall, the brand, targeted brand awareness for that property. So here's where it gets a little tricky though. Now set expectations. So we are kind of role playing here, but you've got me believing in TikTok. Now you've given me what seems like a pretty reasonable budget to carve out that I want to experiment with on my 5K. And you've given me the timeline, and you've given me some really interesting metrics to follow. What does success look like?
Yeah. So success, what we want to see when you're investing here is overall, this should decrease your costs per acquisition or cost per lead. And so we want to see that happen. What we also want to see in success metric is new users coming into your website, and then higher increase in your brand searches. So those would be like the three KPI or key performance indicators that we would look for as far as success. And we want to make sure that that's just fulfilling your flywheel and continuing to keep things moving within your property. So hopefully you don't have as many vacant units, that we're being able to fulfill those at a much faster rate than what you're used to. But really the main driver for success is, are we decreasing your cost per acquisition when we're investing in these upper funnel channels? Because again, they do everything to fuel paid search. And that's going to be your main indicator in paid search, is what's working well, is that cost per acquisition. And so I'd say that's the main success driver. And we want to see that depending on how much you've invested, how much that budget has changed. Typically, what I recommend is if we are shifting your budget by more than 50%, we should see a return on investment at a net 20. So we should see that at a 20% success rate, or improvement compared to what you were doing before.
Meaning the cost per acquisition?
Yes.
Okay, so if we won't use your outliers, terrible cost per acquisitions, but let's just use it simple of $50, that if you were to carve out in the neighborhood of 50% of your budget towards not just TikTok, but platforms of the like, that success would be getting that to $40.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, bringing that down to at least $40 and seeing that start to come down and dwindle. Because we've seen that ourselves, where we've had people diversify and you go from $80 at a cost per acquisition down to $46. And so that's where we want to trend in that downward, and that's where we would take a look at that 90-day mark, and then hopefully continue to see that go down, right? Because it's not just going to stop at that 20% savings, but continue to go down.
And how then should I decide between TikTok and Spotify or YouTube, email, whatever? I mean, influence marketing, because I can't do it all on 5K.
Yeah.
How do you help them? And if they're open to it, would you say, yeah, test 2 at the same time, or don't do that? Because that does come up, especially with lease up sometimes when the budgets are a little bit bigger. But it isn't realistic for them to try everything at once, and probably not a good idea, because talk about muddying up the picture. It becomes really hard. So not to answer for you, but yeah, take it just a tad further. How would you decide between all of the options in that kind of upper funnel bucket on a TikTok or something else?
Yeah, I love that you're asking this question. I actually just did like an analysis recently on like a region, so the West region versus like the U.S. And not.
You told them to close their eyes and spin the wheel.
Yeah. So, not every asset, every region is gonna perform in the same way with the same media mix. And so when you're determining what to invest in, it's going to really depend on your asset, the assets you have available to you, which being like video, images, photography, sometimes your staff, like that can be a big factor as well. On
operations.
What we choose, like what we recommend for that investment. So it's going to depend on like a number of things. And it's going to depend on kind of the region that you're in. So just because it's on the top of my head, in the Western region, what we had noticed, which spoiler alert, we're going to have some fun things coming out with it. But what we noticed in the West compared to the US is that properties in the West succeeded had a much lower, cost per acquisition when they had invested.
In a good way or a bad way?
In a good way.
Okay.
A lower cost per acquisition.
It's a good thing.
A cheaper lead when they invested in 3 to 4 services. So that's paid search and then maybe 3 other upper funnel services. When you compare that to the US as a whole is maybe 2 to 3, which is really interesting data to like look at and like splice out when you're looking at.
When you say 2 to 3, do you can you just clarify that ILS could be 2 ILSs but only count as one platform?
Correct.
Or
Yeah.
just so people understand, because a lot of people say, I'm going to put a small amount of budget, or maybe not, with apartment list, and then I'm going to go with apartments.com. So I'm on, one's a pay per lease, but you would in this case say we're still talking, that's one channel. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
one
Okay,
source.
cool. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So the findings were that meaningfully better outcomes in the form of costs, and I think that was one of the things that we may have skimmed by, that's important to also define. When we say cost per acquisition, we are not talking cost per lease.
Correct.
Yeah. So do you want to quickly cover off on how Digible, and many of our clients, we're not leading the charge on a crusade to redefine these metrics, but will you quickly just cover off on what we mean when we say cost per acquisition of $50, $500, $1,200?
Yeah, absolutely. So acquisition is going to be a lead that comes into the website that is scheduling a tour, using the contact forms, and getting to the operations team. So our role as Digible is to provide those leads to you, optimize your marketing to be able to improve lead quality. And then the on-site teams, that's their job to close that into that lease. And so when we're talking about the cost per acquisition, what we mean is getting prospects to schedule
acquiring qualified leads.
Yeah,
perfect.
Absolutely. Calls, tours, contact form submissions, all of those things.
You may or may not know what the budgets were on what you were describing, but I'm going to bring this up as a springboard into a pretty tricky part of this whole equation, which is, when have I diluted? So there's two ends of this. When's the point of diminishing returns? So when am I spending too much in search? Because I think, as I said, and I still believe this, if you gave me $500, I'd probably put it in search, versus TikTok, if that was the only thing you gave me. But if you gave me $5,000, I wouldn't say you should put it all in search, because to me, there's a point of diminishing returns where you're not going to see as much value because you're relying too much on the bottom of the funnel and not creating not pushing, right? Not creating awareness for the property. And then the other part of that, though, is, okay, I gave you $5,000. Now let's talk diminishing returns on the other side, meaning if I have $500 on TikTok, $500 on Spotify, $500 on email, $500 on Meta, $500 on YouTube, $500 on ILS, aren't I diluting too much? Where it's like, now that's not going to be effective. So do you have some perspective? Is there any general best practices you can offer? And I find this super fascinating because it was years ago that we did explore this pretty intentionally with one of our clients, where we were trying to figure out from a search impression share where that line was, where it's like, okay, we'll push this to 80%, which is very aggressive on those keywords. And it actually kept paying back, but if we were to move out of those keywords, you started to see the diminishing returns, where it's like, this, now my cost per acquisition is going up, not down. So that's an example for people listening of what I mean by diminishing returns within specific platforms. But then the reality of, hey, even at 5K, I have, relatively speaking, I still have a constrained budget. You're not telling me to put it on 8 platforms, are you, RayAnn?
No, never.
Right.
Never.
So speak a little bit to that, I guess, both ends of that, where there's diminishing returns on, a 1 or 2 channel approach, and then where you've diluted yourself too much because you're trying to be everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. So the 1 or 2 channel approach, I think, we've kind of hit on that a little bit of, you're dwindling your property down to just a couple keywords, and you're hoping that the right types of keywords, that the people you're looking for are searching for those, right? So you are risking, you're hedging your performance on the searcher. You're putting your success in their hands, versus when you're investing in a couple other platforms. And what I will always recommend for our clients is always investing in paid search, always investing in SEO, especially in today's, AI and the way that things are going with GEO, always investing there, and then picking 1 to 2 other platforms that you're comfortable saying, hey, we know that this is going to be a funnel driver. This is going to support our search campaigns, and then test and see which one is working the best for you. What works well with one asset in one market might not work best in the other. So that could be SEO, paid search, and maybe it's meta ads, and email campaigns. And that's going to work best for you. And I would say like determining that again is going to be based on what kind of assets do you have available to you. So if you have a ton of great video assets, put it into TikTok, put it into YouTube, even demand gen or performance max. Like those assets and are very, very useful for those types of platforms. So if you have those, do that, experiment with that, and see what that looks like for you. Again, on that 90-day timeline. And just kind of see how that's working out. So I would say like that's usually my recommendation is SEO, paid search, always, and then diving into a couple others like paid search or paid social, TikTok, geofencing, those kinds of things, and kind of experiment with what works best for you. It's not a one size fits all, and it shouldn't be.
Totally. I'm going to push you a little further on this one because you didn't quite for me get at when's the diminishing returns or how do I determine that with search. So the logic is couldn't agree more, totally sound, and why you shouldn't do that, but how to know when you've gone too far. And I'm going to feed you and you can just say, yep, we can move on. I totally agree. Or you can expand on it or tell me this is, but you said maybe the most important, and I think it is your cost per acquisition. Is that what you would encourage somebody to look at if they're like, I'm not sure whether I'm spending enough or too little on search? Before we even talk, RayAnn, about all this other cool stuff, I want to know that I'm at that point, because that's the optimal. Is like I've maximized what I can get from search. Is it a fair assumption that you would say, yeah, that's going to be done through CPA? Is once you start to see that go the other direction, so you're trying to push that as far as you can, but that would then flag, hey, you're now going the other direction. You're now at that point of diminishing returns. So yes, no, let me expand on that.
I would expand a little bit. So
yeah, go for it.
Yes, CPA. So if you're seeing that like your cost per acquisition is slowly starting to drift up, you haven't necessarily changed your budget in a crazy way. Obviously, there's other factors that can contribute to that. I would say if your CPA is starting to creep up, absolutely. And you hit on it earlier too, is that impression share. So if you're seeing that like your brand search volume, because Google Ads gives you that opportunity to look at how many people are searching for my brand, gives you the impression share volume, those kinds of things. If you're seeing that your brand search volume, Google will tell you, hey, there's not enough searches for you to be using this as like your main keyword. You should maybe invest some of this budget elsewhere. That's a huge red flag for me, and something that I do a lot with some of our analysis is we look at like, okay, are we getting even enough brand searches? Because if you're not, then paid search isn't going to do a whole lot more for you. You're going to end up paying more and more and more for every click, and not every click turns into a conversion. And so I think that's also the other end.
That's great. That's great add on there. All right, now let's go back to the other side. You convinced me. I have to have search and SEO, and you're not fighting me on putting some money in ILS. Where that leaves me, I'm backing into it. I think I have $1,500, and you really intrigued me with Spotify. You mentioned, some of these native advertising, which sounds really interesting. There's micro influencing, and we still haven't talked about YouTube. I want to do all of those. I'm pretty sure on $1,500, you'd say that's nice, but we're not going to do that. When is it too diluted? So would you just say, hey, there's just some general best practices, and I don't know if I'd say within this industry, but when it comes to budgeting, $500 floors, $750, because you mentioned with TikTok $850 to $12, I think is what you said. So is that how you would kind of come back to somebody, I don't want to say disappoint them, but that was so excited about all these things and say, actually, we're going to need to narrow this down. So yeah, can you be more specific on like how you would back into like, we can't do 5, we're only going to have to do 4? Is it based on just what you've come to know as like minimum floors in order to see results, or is there metrics, something else that you would also use to determine 4, not 5, or 5, not 6, or 3, not 4?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's actually more related to like the market size itself, demand, supply, and what's going on there, and how many renters you actually have in your area, right? So there's such a thing as impression fatigue and too much out there, and so if you're looking at it, and
I don't believe that. I just had to tell you, like, I'm excited to get into this with you, but go ahead.
we'll disagree on that.
Yeah, it's great.
Um,
That's what the show's for. David's not here, so I can't argue with him.
Yeah, I mean, I totally believe that there's such thing as impression fatigue. Like, it's like driving home and you're like, that light that I pass through every time, was that green or was that red? You know, I didn't know. And so I think
We're all comforted hearing that
Yeah.
as their example, RayAnn. Be careful if you're
on the
driving in
roads.
Colorado and she's coming home from work.
but you know, I think there is such a thing as impression fatigue. I think that when you have so many renters within the market, you want to be intentional, right? Marketing should always be intentional. And so when you're investing and you're saying, "Hey, I've got $5,000, let's do 8 of these things," it's like, can you be a master of all of them? I'm not quite sure. And so what are your goals? Where are you at? You know, what is your current occupancy at? What does your pipeline look like? And then that gives us that like better idea of like where you should invest. As far as like metrics and what I see is when we're starting to see if you are investing in all these platforms and you are starting to see those return or new users start to diminish, that's like, okay, we're not hitting new audiences where we're at. Where do we need to pivot? If you're not seeing, and that's in your Google Analytics. So if you're not seeing that, if you're not seeing in your Google Analytics that your assisted conversions are coming in from other places, that's maybe a time to look at it and say, okay, where are we investing today, and should we shift somewhere else, or are we just doing too much that we can't do it well? Because a lot of the programs or a lot of the services, they sound great, they sound really interesting, but that doesn't mean that you need to spend all of your dollars in all of those places. So I'd say try out a couple first, see what's working there. If you feel like you're not getting enough impressions, so let's say that your new users is still fairly low, try another avenue, adding another avenue, or swapping that for something else that you're currently doing.
Yeah. Well, I love some of the things you said in there, especially, paying attention to, again, Google Analytics, but where what your new user, percentage, I guess, or amount of traffic looks like. And that very likely, if you're too diluted, probably isn't going to go super well for you. But if you're not diversified enough, so it's finding that sweet spot, and that, I'm sure you agree with me, is so important, not just to be aware of kind of general benchmarks, but to benchmark your own property. Because I say this all the time. It's like Peter Attia says this, about blood work, but he's like, it's really almost criminal that so much of the treatments out there in healthcare are based on averages, because none of us are average,
Yeah.
And so they really should be basing their treatment plans on RayAnn and on Reid and all that, goes into us, right? And really, it's the same thing with digital marketing and properties. It's like there is some value directionally, just to know, like, are my lipids, in this case, my returning visitors and my leasing velocity. Like, I'm not discounting like the comps and the context, but when it comes to getting more sophisticated, graduating from one platform, maybe two, to what you're describing, which is a more full, funnel layered approach, it's critical that you benchmark your own property.
Absolutely.
Look at your own Google Analytics, right? Look at your own CRM and all that stuff, and don't get too distracted, sucked into, what the person across the street or what's normal, right? God, there was something else I was going to bring up about that.
I'd also add too, don't get distracted by just the attribution model that you're seeing within your CRM. Because I think that's a big, big challenge as well is, hey, we've invested all of this and, now all of a sudden my property website, conversions are increasing in our CRM. And that's a great sign. I think today we get a lot of clients that are like, hey, we invested this here, but we're not seeing paid search specific, maybe conversions increase, but we're seeing our website kind of pop off. Are we is that you guys? Is it not? And I think the whole sense of it is like, get comfortable in kind of this gray area, and saying, we know that we invested X amount of dollars in this upper funnel channel, and that's going to just fundamentally change how leads are coming in. And it may not be an apple to apple comparison, but you're going to see, as long as you can take this graph on this graph and you see them kind of inclining together, or increasing together, then that's what you want to see. And just kind of knowing that that's going together, and you've made that change at this time, and that's a positive.
Totally. All right. Well, let's wrap this up with, you mentioned SEO as a, you didn't say given, but just automatic. Like, and I am going to fill this in for you. Not that you didn't say any of this, but good luck being, I'll say, efficient, effective, smart with your budget and ignoring SEO. So yeah, we're on the same page there. It's like you can do all this great work getting people there, but if you're not capitalizing and being smart with what you're doing on the back end, as well as like that front door now, which is no longer a website, but Google Business Profile, you're leaving a lot of money on the table. That's not the only reason to do SEO, but what lots of people are saying now, we're talking about with SEO is, how much of SEO includes the AI search that's going on. And I say AI search, and I'm going to keep saying this, maybe partly because I get worn out trying to explain and distinguishing between geo versus AEO, AIO. It sounds like, the farmer song that you teach your kids when they're 3. But not a news flash. I don't know whether this was 3 days ago or last week. But yeah, ChatGPT is, officially saying, yeah, we're open for business. We're going to be doing some betas and whatnot. So everybody's scrambling. What do I do? How do I approach this? You're talking right now about single channel, multi-channel. You did talk about search. Here comes like this kind of convergent. I don't even know if it's convergence, but it's like SEO. Does it include all the AI stuff? And should I be thinking differently now about how much to spend there? So do you have some early opinions of like, if you were checking the box with a SEO package or solution, that provided X amount of Google posts, did some schema, optimized your meta, it's like, that ain't gonna cut it. Like with AI search, and I don't want to confuse people with the paid opportunity that's still very much, emerging and people are super excited about. But what are your suggestions from a budget and just a strategy right now as it relates to the AI disruption? Because it's the biggest disruption this industry has seen in at least a decade. It's like everybody was an ILS, then they were like, oh, I could pay on Google. Now it's like they've been excited about all these other platforms, TikTok among them. And then here comes AI search. And people aren't sure, I think, how much to spend or can they spend, back to diminishing returns. So directionally, and I've had conversations with a couple of others about this on the show, but I'm just curious. Yeah. How do you figure that in? What would you be saying to somebody that brought that up to you on a call and was like, okay, I had $5,000. Should I put 2,000 into AI search? And what am I even talking about?
Yeah, no, I don't think you need to put quite that much into AI search, but I think it needs to definitely be there. I would say somewhere, and SEO is typically going to be like a service that somebody's doing for you. You're not necessarily, it's very different. You're not paying for ad space, right? But you are investing in, you're investing in almost how Google sees you and how
visibility.
And that visibility. And it is important. And so I would say with that, depending on what the offerings are, like you can invest in anywhere between $800 to $1,000 into that. And what's important is that it doesn't just include those baseline fundamentals of like the meta tags, image descriptions, those things. Those things are very, very necessary. But that it also includes the GEO. It includes how are we going to add in our FAQ pages, be relevant to searchers that are using AI, because even even as you do a lot of those optimizations, AI is still looking at a ton of like indexing ILS data. And so not a ton of like individual property websites have been pushed to the top of that as of yet. I think the more that the industry gets invested into that SEO, GEO optimization, like we're going to see definitely more of that. And that's all about relevance to the website, to your property. And that includes everything. Like Gen Z renters, they want to know, do I have an apartment with a co-working space and has the ability to host parties? Those kinds of things. Like they're doing these long tail keywords that you need to be able to answer on your website, so that way Google a robot, when it crawls that website, it has the ability to put you into that search results for AI. And I think the other important piece that when AI came in, like this section of it kind of got glossed over, was that with SEO, was that Meta, so Instagram and Facebook, are now being considered for Google authority. And that's getting slept on, in my opinion, as far as like SEO work and how that can all come together. And so the more that you branch into these additional fundamentals that Google has released in the last year or so, the more that's going to feed into the AI as well, because that's just going to help a little bit more. So
helpful to know. I think that's right now, I feel like each month we hear you really need to be focused more on your organic social if you want to see better results on your AI search rank or visibility. And then the next month, it's like, forget that. It's actually Google Business Profile. So you need to totally optimize that, and that's what will create better. So, and I say this not to be snarky. I think it's all unfolding. Like, so it's not clear, but I think what you've been saying the whole time is as long as you're paying attention to the right metrics, then you'll be able to optimize to the right strategy.
100%.
And so don't get caught up. You didn't say this, I am, but too much in necessarily the trends or, what you're reading. Again, your property is unique, and nobody really totally knows, and even on the old stuff, but certainly the new stuff, exactly what the right balance is. So you just have to have the right partner that knows which metrics we should be following and ultimately optimizing to. Yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, this was condensed for me, but not probably for most podcasts, meaning we kept it under an hour, but just barely. But I thought this was awesome. Super rich conversation. There's always more to build on. I can't wait, and not that we will wait a full year to have you back on, but just how much of this has changed 12 months from now. So in particular, I think, has the pendulum moved meaningfully from paid media to organic media? So that's the one that I can't wait to talk to you about in 12 months, and maybe we'll have a stop in between on that topic or something else. But there's just, I think that is one of the biggest shifts, because we all know in digital marketing, there's a lot more zero-click happenings. And so if it's becoming more about visibility, there's a lot of other ways besides just paid campaigns to generate visibility. So
Absolutely.
It should be a fun topic. RayAnn, anything I missed? Last words?
I don't think so. I'm excited to come back in a year and see, at least a minimum in a year, and see how that shifts, because I think it's going to be a pretty cool year for organic and SEO specifically. I think it's going to be a challenge and fun for teams to kind of figure out how do we continue and stay ahead and keep them on their toes. So I'm excited.
Heck yeah. I thought you were going to say this was the best podcast I've ever been a part of, and I've never been interviewed with such deep wisdom.
That's true, because it's the only podcast I've been a part of.
All right. Well, there you have it. You can find RayAnn and make sure you spell it. But if you wanted to get a hold of her, she is on LinkedIn, which is a little bit easier and it is Corton on LinkedIn.
Is, yes.
But if somebody wanted to shoot you an email and pick up the conversation, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, my email's RayAnn, RayAnn at Digible.com. And yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn as well, RayAnn Corton, Corton. But yeah, I'm out there.
Awesome.
Come find me.
It's RayAnn without the E on the end.
No E.
I think I made that mistake a few times on Slack. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Stay tuned for the next session of Riffing with Reid. Have a good one.